Welcome to the Colors Delight for Life. It's about life, where we share our experience, strength, and hope to help others so they have a better understanding. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. So, my name's Sunil Godse, and I'm deep into intuition, and really kind of understanding it. And it really kind of came from when I wrote my first book called Fail Fast, Succeed Faster. And the premise of that book was about failure and the hurdles of businesses or executives and entrepreneurs. And so if you were to read basically the failures and hurdles, then as long as you don't repeat those mistakes, then you should be able to succeed faster. And the one question I kept getting asked was, what, Sunil, give me the one thing that's going to help me succeed. And I said, well, I used to roll my eyes, say, I didn't come here with a cue card or a PDF worksheet. This is a 400-page book. And until I went back to the audio recordings. And when I did, 80 to 90% of these people, these business executives and entrepreneurs who you would have thought were sort of process and data driven, used some form of language that said, I ignored my gut. I should have trusted my intuition. I knew what the right decision was and I didn't make it. And so this was really revealing to me, saying, wow, this is a lot of people talking about this thing called intuition. This is really important. And so when I looked into when intuition kind of hit me, there were a number of instances that I recall very vividly. And the first was when I was 5 years old. And when I was 5, there were these video games that that I wanted to buy and I asked my dad if he could buy them. He said, Sunil, look, they're too expensive. And I distinctly remember this voice telling me, Sunil, go door to door to raise money. And that's exactly what I did. I raised $200 and $100 went to my dad and the other $100 went to charity. And so as I started progressing and aging in life, what ends up happening with everybody is they start getting a number of relationships that they establish. And a lot of them aren't necessarily the healthy ones. And even though our intuition is telling us to get rid of some of these people, we continue on. And so we start following bad advice. Some of us go through traumatic experience at the hands of others. Somebody says something that is so nasty that it triggers you, or you're living your life trying to prove things to others. And then you start getting groomed and you start to mute your intuition because you can't hear what I call intuitive signals. And this is when you start to do things for other people. And so for me, if I looked at the first decision I made, a major decision was my career. As a South Asian male, I could be doctor, lawyer, engineer, or there's failure. Those are the only 4 doors that you're given to as a South Asian male. And so I went into door number 3. I became the engineer, and I hated it. And 2 years in, again, these intuitive signals were telling me that I needed to break away and do what I actually loved, which was the first signal at 5 years old, entrepreneurship. And so I broke away in year 2. I became a private investor in a Mexican restaurant. And pretty soon I was making 5 times more in dividends doing that than I was as a full-time engineer. And so in year 3, I let that go. I let engineering go. I sacrificed my relationship with my dad. But I was happy. I was making, I had 6 businesses, $20 million in revenues, and was loving it. And then I ended up morphing into being a management consultant. And soon enough, there was this big contract that I got, and the numbers were insane in terms of how much they were going to compensate me. But the numbers kept changing, or the terms kept changing in the contract. And so when I spoke to the HR people, for something, my intuition was saying what they were saying is not exactly what they meant. I didn't believe them, yet I was so emotionally tied to the contract that I ended up spending every penny to go down there. And I lost everything because they didn't pay me. And I came back to Canada with basically 25 cents in my bank account. And perhaps the most devastating was when I was in engineering. I remember I had this friend that came up to me to try and get some advice. She was being stalked at the time. And, she was saying, Sunil, I need to meet with you that afternoon. And although my intuition was telling me I should meet with her that afternoon because I didn't have anything there, for some reason, I didn't trust myself to make that decision. And I said, let's meet a couple of days later. for some reason. And what ended up happening is the very next day, that same fellow walked up to her at a bus shelter and put a bullet through her head, and killed her instantly. And so now I really needed to dig deep into figuring out what intuition was, because now I've lost a friend, I've lost my career, some money. I've lost a lot of stuff because I ignored this thing called intuition. And so when I took a really deep dive into understanding what it was, I looked at intuition from kind of an art and a science perspective, similar to engineering. So if you look at the properties of steel, for example, steel has a mass-like property, and it also has a wave-like property, which is sort of the art and science. And for me, that's how it really how I understood it. And so, and the research at the time, there's people say that intuition is voices from God, signals from God, manifestation, and if those are how people understand intuition, that is absolutely fine, because that's how they experience it, and that's how they see the signals of intuition. And soon enough, when I started to dive into the research, one of the first things I used to think was that, well, if I heard intuition at 5 years old, perhaps I'm born with it. And so lo and behold, I find this paper that shows that infants as young as 2 months old have been shown to have intuitive tendencies, or as this paper calls it, intuitive physics. And then for me, being able to not define it and having a hard time define it, I saw this research paper that had some brain scans showing that intuition hits the limbic system, which is the decision-making area, the emotional control. And all it knows is fight or flight, like think, do, trust. Like there's no capacity for language. And so now it makes sense as to why I needed to define this in my own way, and everybody has their own definition. And so in the podcast series that I have, where I've interviewed over 1,000 people now, each and every single person has their own individual definition of what intuition is. And it's for that same reason. It's because they define it as per their experiences or how they feel comfortable defining it. And the other interesting thing that I found is that there were a couple of papers that looked at how intuition impacted your decision making. And both of them said that your intuition actually impacts the way that you make your decisions on average 7 to 10 seconds before you actually make a decision or take an action. So this thing is really quick, and it's probably faster than that. It's just the research is now catching up to us that are giving better research methodologies. So now I kind of have the science part of intuition, and I've got the art part of intuition, which is sort of these signals. And what I found with these signals is there's kind of two kinds of signals. There's the positive ones and the negative ones. And so when we're making a decision that is the right one, then the positive signals actually tell us that you're making the right decision. And so those, for me, for example, are the dots connecting, or for in some cases, you feel this flow or a pull. And on the other side are negative signals. And the negative signals are basically warning you to say that the decision that you're about to make is the wrong one. And so for me, the negative signals are more of like that really get that gut feeling. And in some cases, I get hyper focused. So my peripheral vision, I lose it, and I get hyper focused that there's something or someone that is tripping my intuition up, and there's warning bells coming up. And so that's how it functions for me. And this is very individual to everybody because it's your own experiences, it's your own definition, it's your own signals. And so you and I can share a similar signal, like let's say that gut feeling. But for you, that could be in a personal situation. For me, that could be in a personal, professional situation, or for you, it could be relationships. For me, it could be business. And so that way it's very, very individual. And the other thing I discovered is that these signals are actually packed with a lot of information. And what I found is that there's 4 types of intuition that actually are working in the background that these signals actually leapfrog off of. And the way that I explain how these 4 types of intuition work is actually through the lens of a non-believer of intuition. And so one of the fellows that I interviewed was an investment banker by the name of John Rothschild. And John was someone who data and experience ruled everything. And so when you're talking about voices from God and manifestation, meditation as sort of almost proxies for intuition, he's just saying, Sunil, look, you know what? I can talk to you about intuition. It just doesn't exist. And I'm not sure what we're going to talk about. Come down anyways. I've given you an hour and I haven't seen you in a while. So we'll catch up. So I go down to see him and I turn on the camera and I'm telling him about some of the CEOs who actually see omens and have built multi-million dollar organizations based on these signals. And he's just saying, yes, Neil, you know what? I'd love to shake that guy's hand because, yeah, intuition just, listen, he says that everything that you know, whatever decision you make is always based on experience and learning. And so now I'm going to start getting into the 4 types of intuition. And one of the 4 types is called experiential intuition. And experiential intuition actually looks at all the experiences that you've had, both good and bad, formal and informal, and learning. So you can have well-educated learning in school and what have you, and your street smarts. And it's taking all of that information and putting it into the subconscious area of your brain like a library. So if you look at your brain like an iceberg, 90% is below water, which is your subconscious, and 10% above water, which is your conscious. So when you're about to make a decision, your intuition goes into this library and pulls out the relevant experience to inform you of the decision that you're making. And so when it sends you a signal, that signal is packed with a lot of information and learning that you've had in the past. And when I was telling John this, what I was telling him is that sometimes your intuition goes against your data. And he said, well, that's kind of funny, Sunil. I have a story about that. And so this is where now we're going to get into the second of the 4 called situational intuition. John was in the business of putting franchise locations in. And so like a McDonald's or a Wendy's or what have you, Dunkin' Donuts. And so what his team would do is they would look at demographics and traffic patterns and development in the area and rate a location out of a scale of 10. A 9 out of 10 meant that they would put a franchise location in there. Anything less, it just wasn't worth it. And there was one location in Toronto, a really crappy area of Toronto, where his team had identified a location that was a 5.5 out of 10. And so the second of the 4 intuition types of intuition is called situational intuition, where John goes into this area, looks around, and he was saying something was telling me that we should put a franchise location there. And even though it was a 5.5 out of 10, he's saying perhaps intuition, I'm not sure. So he's now actually using the word intuition. He went against his team's advice and he put a location there. And that ended up being one of the first franchise locations for the beer market. And that happened to be one of the most profitable of all the franchise properties that he had under his portfolio. And then at some point, John was telling me that his purpose changed. He no longer wanted to go from an investment banker to actually owning a business. And so now we're going to get into the third of the 4 types called relational intuition. And what relational intuition does is it filters your relationships to only allow those people inside in your inner circle who you absolutely trust. They're not yes people. These are people that are going to give you constructive criticism, but you absolutely know that they are there for you through thick and thin, and they're there truly to help you move your life forward. And it doesn't mean that you're kicking everybody else out. What you're doing is you're keeping everybody else at bay because they don't add to your life in any meaningful capacity. And so when John's purpose changed, those people who are concerned with ego, fame, money, high-end restaurants, limousines, security, all that stuff, all of them told him he was nuts. And the only person that asked him why was his wife. And his wife says, John, why do you want to do this? And John said, you know what? It just feels right. There's the intuitive signal. And he goes on to say, sometimes you may have all the data, but you just have to trust your intuition. And now John, an hour later, is now fully embracing intuition from starting off with just doesn't exist. And now he actually quits his job. And so the fourth of the four is called creative intuition, which actually helps you make the decision. So if you make a mundane decision like eating a sandwich or turning left at the lights, your creative intuition is pretty low. It's pretty mundane. But his creative intuition was pretty high, because you would think that somebody with a big background in data and analytics as an investment banker would pick a company that has strong, healthy revenues, good cash flow, and an excellent balance sheet. His intuition picks a tiny, bankrupt little restaurant, and he quits $3 to $4 million a year job and walks into the front doors of that tiny, bankrupt little restaurant. And that restaurant happened to be Eastside Mario's location number one. And he grew that one location to over 1,000 under different brand names. And in the 20 years before he retired, he turned that one location into a $2 billion behemoth, all because it felt right. And that's the power of intuition. And that's the foundation that you have when it comes to intuition in your signals. And so when it comes to relationships, when I was talking about earlier, where you seem to start living your life through the lens of other people, those signals get muted and you can't hear them. And it's because we talk about living in the present moment, but we don't do it. It's almost like having a social media meme. And when we start to live through the lens of other people, we aren't really listening to ourselves. We're not trusting ourselves. We're not trusting those signals that our intuition is telling us. And, this is what you need to do, is to take a look back at the decisions you make and figure out what those signals are. Right. And once you figure out what those signals are, then you start to trust yourself to make the decisions that move you forward. So similar to your background and your story that you have, and some of the, amazing, things I can't believe some of the things that you've been through.
I used to be a corrections officer and I sold Christmas cards as a kid. So I was an entrepreneur when I was a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you look at, and you were mentioning you were being in a cult, right? And so even though your intuition is kind of telling you that perhaps what you're being fed may not necessarily be right for you, when you start living your lens, having your lens go through these people who are very, very good at bringing people together, you start following that at the behest of your intuition that's saying you got to get out. Right. And so this is where the intuitive signals, figuring out what your signals are very, very important. And it's not only just, figuring out those signals and what they are, leaving past those relationships that no longer serve your purpose. And that's done in 14 seconds. Your intuition is able to trust someone or distrust someone in 14 seconds. And unfortunately, we don't do that. And some people say, well,
My entire company and company culture is run on trust.
yeah, it's big, huge, huge. And if you don't have that, you're dead in the water, because people don't want to work for you. People don't want to buy from you, and the marketplace doesn't want to hear from you. And if you have any of those problems, you're dead in the water. You're going to be puddling around, just sort of, bottom feeding, as I say, while those companies that are doing it the right way are going to surpass you. And, if you do things the right way from a business perspective, you crush your competition, because they aren't doing it. 99% of the businesses aren't doing it. And like I say, that trust is there in 14 seconds. Mm-hmm. And if you can hone that trust from the businesses that you're running, look how far they're ahead you're going to be, because you will be the one standing in what you're selling.
I look how far I've come in 8 months, and the trust and leap of faith I took to hire folks and work out of my retirement income. Mm-hmm. And to see all this bloom was awesome. and I work out of intuition. I don't read business books or anything. I listen to good people. What you put in your ears makes a big difference on your mindset, and what you put into your heart and your body and your spirit and stuff. Another great thing I just thought you might want to know, 15 years ago, I used to be 494 pounds.
Wow.
So let me say I've been through a huge transformation.
Yeah,
And
literally.
yeah, so my point is, I'm not trying to interrupt here, but
No, that's
I,
okay.
I, I just want you to know that I've had tons of life experiences, and I have put that into my books. I use intuition all the time now in the past year, and it's made a huge difference. I've come through things that people would have, I don't know. My intuition tells me to let go now of things
Hmm.
and not to push things. And it's a great thing to use because if you listen to your head, it's usually wrong 90% of the time. But if you listen to your gut, I have found it's right 100% of the time.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. And I mean, the research is showing this as well, right? Your neurons, hit you here in the amygdala, and so by the time it has goes what you saw the head, which is the frontal lobe, it's too late, right? Because you're already past the point of knowing to trust your intuition, and this is very, very important. And sometimes we want to make things very logical. In some cases, we want to think about decisions because they are important, and that's great. Your intuition acts in an instant in time, and if it's an important decision or it's a place that you're going to go that's different or uncomfortable, a number of people want to take some time to think about it. That doesn't mean that the original decision is wrong. It just means that you need your time to get there. And fear is your best friend, is the way I look at it. When your intuition hits your brain, there's only two things that are going to happen. You're either going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or you're not. It's binary. And so when you feel fear, and that fear is accompanied with a positive intuitive signal, all that's saying is that you're entering a different area of your life where there is opportunity, there is blossomness, and there are decisions that you make. They're going to have you be successful. It's just that it's getting you out of the old comfort zone that you were probably in before while you were ignoring your intuition, and getting you to open up the possibilities. And if this is a positive signal that's telling you you're making the right decision, even though it feels fearful, it's a positive signal. It's telling that, and remember, that's packed with information, with experience. And so your intuition is saying, you got this because you had this before. You had the experiences before, or you had the skills before, or you had the self-confidence before. So just apply that again and move ahead. And that's why fear, in my opinion, is your best friend. And that's when one door of opportunity after another opens up for you, and you just don't look back.
Now, uh, one great thing, and could you tell me a little bit? I haven't heard a little bit about your childhood and what went on in your childhood, that brought you to this point. I've heard about your intuition. Could you tell me about some things you overcome in your life and maybe in different aspects of your life, or maybe failures that were great learning lessons or anything else like that? Would you be willing to share that?
Yeah, sure. So in my childhood, if I look at, even when I was 5 and I had that voice, there were all these sort of breadcrumbs that were left when it came to entrepreneurship. And so, for example, when I was in engineering, I joined a popular Canadian retailer that sells men's suits. I had no sales background. And what I really relied on was the relationship I had with customers, and that ended up having me become the third highest dollar per hour when it came to sales. Now, what happened, unfortunately, was that as I'm going through these sort of entrepreneurial breadcrumbs like Hansel and Gretel, and finding my way to what should be a life of entrepreneurship, unfortunately, my parents divorced when I was in high school. My marks tanked quite a bit in the first year, and I was being groomed to be that doctor, lawyer, engineer, to follow the East Indian Kool-Aid, right? Drink the East Indian Kool-Aid, to follow societal norms, and I ended up not having that confidence in myself to make those right decisions. And so therefore the major decisions I made in terms of my career um, had me lose some time, and thankfully I was able to eventually listen to my intuition because the signals got louder and louder, so much that I couldn't ignore them anymore. And then I had to move into entrepreneurship. And that was scary, because as you know, there you start with a clean slate. You have nothing and you have to make something out of nothing, an idea. And, thankfully for me, there was some great ideas in retail clothing and wholesale clothing and pop-up events and an entertainment company that got me to have others trust me to say, yeah, I'm going to pay to buy clothes from him. I'm going to pay to order from this company. I'm going to pay to, go see a band because of this event that he's organized. And again, that's all based on trust, right? So as much as there was a bit of a struggle, it really kind of got me to appreciate, looking back, the role that intuition had played. And one of the things that we have to be careful is to make sure that even though we've had bad experiences, that we should celebrate them, because your intuition uses them as learning lessons moving forward. And so I always suggest that, yes, everybody that talks about having a hard life and have gone through hardship, but all the hardships are actually wins for you, because they are the ones that strengthen you even more when it comes to making the decisions that matter.
Well, just one personal note, not to always bring myself into this. I have found I turned all the muck of my life. I'm bipolar. I'm PTSD, anxiety. I'm labeled crazy, but I don't think I'm crazy. But and I've got about 6 different disabilities I deal with on a daily basis. But as far as I'm concerned, there's an opportunity. I like to say dreams can be opportunities, opportunities can be possibilities, possibilities can be options. And as long as you have those options, you take action on them. And for me, that's kind of a natural flow of where you can see things, because dreams to me are intuition, pushing you forward to where you need to go and where you need to learn. And I find that if you are open to the universe, you can have success, be the top 1% or whatever you ever want to be. I always tell folks you can be anything you want to be. It is your choice. And I find that complaining doesn't help. Been there, done that. Suicide attempts, been through it all. But the point is, what comes out the other end is what counts.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that you touched upon, I think, was sort of the end of that daisy chain of things, that from starting from dreams, is the action piece. And you absolutely need to take action, because dreams will only stay dreams if you don't take action and make them happen. And this is where, okay, you've got the intuitive signals saying to move forward or to move back, but you actually have to do it. And if you don't, you just wallow in the same sort of muck that you're in, and you kind of wonder why your life doesn't really progress, or we're too busy still wondering about how other people think, or we're still tied to societal norms, and we somehow think it's hard to change. My opinion is it's not hard to change. I think it's easy to change. You make it hard because you somehow think that you're tied to these norms that other people have created for you. Um, and you just have to change, right? And there's too many dependencies that you have to get rid of. And so when you actually make those changes because of intuition, then you kind of break free of those bonds, so to speak, so that you can actually move in the direction, as you say, with all the stuff that's going on in your life, it doesn't matter, right? Because you're moving your life ahead and you're growing a business and helping others and writing books, and that's changing other people's lives. And it's about taking action. despite the past life that you had or the past experiences. And there's going to be a number of people that are going to remind you of those past experiences, and those are the very people that you need to get rid of, right? Because those are the first ones that you need to cut. And what's so sad about those other people is that there's something that I call opportunity cost, which is it's not just the cost of making a bad decision, it's also the cost of not making the right decision. So it's two times the cost. So when you think about those people who are giving you, bad comments, you know, in that same instance in their life, they could be doing something positive to somebody else or themselves. And so that's a pretty crappy way to live if that's how you want to live your life. And I've certainly seen people like that. People who are close to me are kind of like that. And you know, it's just a waste of time, waste of life. And you end up regretting that at some point. And one of the things I say is, why do we wait for 65 to regret, or 80 or whatever? Why do we wait next week to regret? Why don't we start with today? Let's not regret what we can't do today by doing what we want to do, and make that a daily habit. And that all comes by, in my opinion, trusting your intuition to actually make the decisions that move your life forward.
And one thing I find important in intuition is how you treat people. I look at my team as family, and people can create their own family circle of people. I can remember doing my first Facebook Live and being scared as can be, but I've learned, and like you said, life lessons. And I realized I had a lot of wisdom to share, and you have a great amount of wisdom to share. I can see and learned a lot in life, and that's great. And I really, really applaud you for that. And I'm creative. I do art. I study. It's a way of life now. I've let the past go, everything. And when somebody I figured leaves a bad comment, they must be having a bad day, is all I figured. And that you can do anything you set your mind to, no matter where you've been. That's
Yeah,
huge.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and it's about being bold and taking those actions, and just cutting people off and just letting them go. Right? It's just very, very simple in my mind, and people overcomplicate it, but they shouldn't. I mean, intuition is their best friend. They've got the signals that are helping them do that. So spend the time to figure out how to listen to those signals, by going back to your past experiences and the good and bad, and figure out what do they feel like in the moment. And that's how you gain that inventory of signals. And you need to spend the time to do that, because once you have that inventory of signals, then whatever decision you make is going to be accompanied with that signal, which are usually subtle in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the ones you need to pick up on. And that's how you make decisions that get rid of relationships that are haunting you. And you can do that in as little as 14 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's very simple.
When it comes to intuition and your business and stuff, can you tell the audience in some ways, some business decisions you've made, and what kind of businesses you've had where you've used your intuition?
Yeah, so I've had as mentioned before, I've had like a wholesale clothing company, retail clothing company. So a couple of really neat decisions I made in the retail clothing company. I had, with a partner, we ended up getting a DJ on Thursday nights and putting some dancing people in the windows, and it's never been done before as a concept. And so this is a Thursday evening. It was always from 6 to 8, and the mall was usually dead, except for when we started to do this. We had crowds and lineups trying to get into our store, and at the time we had private branding. And it was just, we just wanted people to have a good time. There was no sales pitch. There were no sales that we are trying to drive them to. We just wanted them to have fun. And Thursday night was the only night that the mall administration would give us a chance to do that. And so that worked like crazy. And then as a management consultant, one of the biggest wins I had was there was a struggling $400,000 company, and they were on their way down really quickly. I think they would have been imploding in about probably 3 to 4 months. And they brought me on to try and salvage the situation. And I had one request from them, which was stay away from my decisions. Whatever I decide, they need to endorse it and be behind it. And if they do, then I might be able to salvage their company. And we agreed on that. And one of the first things I did, which you wouldn't have thought you would do with a struggling company with has cash flow problems, was to raise the salaries. And I raised the salaries across the board for the employees. But the main problem that this company had with the two co-CEOs was trust. They had a big trust issue, and to at least win a bit of trust, that was my way of gaining a little bit of an insight to say, okay, this is really interesting. Who is this guy, Sunil? And even though we know we have some problems, he's willing to value our contribution, because the raise was because I valued their contribution. And how important that was when I was looking to even just stabilize the company. All the employees helped in stabilizing the company. They all helped pitch in to get the operations in order, to help train other people, to contribute in a positive way, to care about the positions that they were in, because finally somebody cared about them. And we stabilized the company, got it to about $750,000, and then it was expansion time. And what I found was that when we were looking to expand, it was the employees working the actual expansion operationally, where I could now concentrate on looking at expansion areas. And so I didn't have to split my time between looking for areas and how are we going to do it on an operational process perspective, because all the other employees helped me with the process, which meant that I could accelerate my ability to look for more franchise locations. And we ended up expanding like crazy. And so in the 2.5 years I was there, we went from $400,000 and sinking to $3.5 million and expanding before I left. And it was all based on this thing called trust, which was the first thing I did. I won back a little bit of trust because I just valued them. And something so simple helped increase basically save the company. Not only save the company, but that company ended up being sixth fastest growing company in the year that I helped with the expansion. And so that's how I use my intuition, right? And there are a number of times where I've walked into a company and my intuition will know either the strategy that they're hiring me to implement is either going to work or not. And in one case, I think they wanted to hire a yes person, and I instantly knew that they couldn't expand in the area they were looking to expand into. They didn't have the proper training. They didn't have the proper sales staff. They didn't have the proper marketing. They didn't have the proper way of treating a customer. And so they needed a major overhaul if they wanted to get into a different type of service that they're looking to offer. And after a number of months, I stood up to a room full of 12 executives to tell them that what they were deciding on is not going to work. And it was a sour note, because they were hoping I said yes. And I remember meeting the CEO a couple of years after that at a private event with the Prime Minister. And I asked him, so, what happened to that expansion? That I said no, but I know you guys were gung ho in doing it. And he said, yeah, we actually tried. And you're actually right. We lost $2 million trying. And we went back to our original operations. I said, I'm so sorry to hear that. And of course, I don't want to rub it in their faces like I told you so, but they didn't listen, right? And there was some corporate hubris or ego that got involved, and that cost that company $2 million. So once again, this is where intuition from a business or corporate perspective comes in, where you walk into a room and you kind of know what to do. Now, yes, there's a lot of experience with that. As I mentioned, there's experiential intuition. So it's not just something that I plucked out of the air. and I'm not some business guru that can just kind of do that on a whim. There's a lot of education, learning, experience, failure that goes with that sentiment or that decision that I made. All right. So, but those are some of the highlights from a bit of a highlight career reel, so to speak.
Wow, that's great. I'm a growing business. I'm on the beginnings of my journey, but one thing I love seeing people's eyes light up like a Christmas tree. That's one of my favorite things. And I had one of my people I started with who couldn't speak up. Now she speaks up at meetings. She's grown exponentially. She's great. And now she's got self-confidence that I don't believe. I love seeing people grow. And one of the things in my company, I says, if you need to learn something, just go out and learn it. I'm giving you freedom of creativity because I don't want to micromanage my people. I want them to grow as people and human beings. And that's my company culture because that sets people up not only for success with my company, which God is the CEO of, which I'm just a partner. And I call it ego easing God out. So I keep my ego out of it because I don't know, simple works best. Your
Yeah.
intuition is simple.
Very simple, very, very simple. And we complicate everything, right? It's a signal. It's positive or negative. It's binary. You're going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or you're not. And we make things way too complicated when it really is that simple. And time again, as I mentioned, I've interviewed over 1,000 people. The decisions they make are very simple that rise to success, that see success in their lives.
Yeah.
And when they complicate things, things tank and things go south pretty fast.
Well, I figured if you start with the right company culture out in the beginning, that carries you through. And they've done things like you said, that company and the employees went way out beyond what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Same thing here. They've gone way beyond the bounds I would ever think. And things I would have thought of, they just did. And I love it that way because I love seeing the people sparkle in their eye and giving them attaboys because, people make mistakes. And one of the things I say, okay, yeah, so what? We all make mistakes and I leave it at that because tearing somebody down. I have two things in my company that will really get you fired: backbiting and gossiping. If you do any of those, you're gone because I don't want you here because I think you would agree.
Yeah, I mean that's again an eroding culture, and so there's nothing wrong with criticism as long as it's constructive and meant in the right way. But when you get into those kind of things, and that's a culture that you shouldn't have started developing, that means you have a hiring issue. Yeah, and if it's not a hiring issue, then it's the next level. You've got a management issue
Yeah.
because for some reason you've allowed that behavior to happen, and so it's an indication of a pain point, and it's just a matter of finding out where is that pain point, and get that fixed really quickly. Because when that becomes pervasive, now you've got a culture that's run amok, and you have to unwind it before you wind it up again, and that takes time and money and effort.
It's better not to have to unwind something or undo something
Yeah,
than
yeah.
to
Better
start
to
out.
start off the right way. Absolutely.
What made you want to start your podcast in the beginning, and how did you get it going? That's, I think, an interesting point as far
Yeah,
as you've been able to really grow it.
yeah. So for me, so the big thing with intuition is it's actually it acts very simple, but it's quite complex. And as we've discussed with the four types and the signals, and what I wanted to do with the podcast series is to say, okay, this is how complex intuition is, and there's a bunch of hurdles and a bunch and four types and signals. But if I can use that education in the context of other people's lives, then people will start to get an appreciation about how complex it is. And in some cases, they may even see how their intuition works and acts in relation to their lives, right? Through as a proxy to the other people I interview. And so that was one of the primary reasons for starting it. And the other thing is whenever I interviewed somebody on their intuition, first of all, almost everybody says yes because intuition's played a big role in their lives. And they tell me some phenomenal stories of when they ignored intuition and they've hit rock bottom, and how they've had sort of a pivot, as I call it, an intuitive moment, and how they've taken that intuitive moment and they've really increase that to something that's very, very successful, not necessarily monetarily, but in their lives. And so I find those stories amazing. I personally love talking about intuition to people. So I myself get a joy when I'm on a podcast and I'm just doing the interview. I find unbelievable just talking about these. And one of the things that I've been told separates my podcast series from others is that we actually get into a deeper level of conversation rather than superficial. So I typically do a little bit more research on the guest that's coming up. And so it's not necessarily what you did, it's why did you do it and what made you make that decision. And we get into a deeper level of conversation that some of the guests have actually said, I really enjoy this conversation, because it becomes a conversation and we get into some really interesting areas of their lives that in some cases they've never told about, or they've thought about in a different way. And so it's for me, it's enjoyable. For the guest, I've been told it's enjoyable. And so I continue to get more guests. And so so of course we've got the Intuitionology podcast series. I'm actually starting a second one on intuitive branding, which will address the business side of it, things. And the very first guest is going to be a fellow by the name of Brendan Kane, who gained 1 million followers in 30 days. And that was based on trust, right? And so we're going to talk about that. And he's turned that into a business, and he's turned that into advising influencers like Taylor Swift and Coca-Cola. And so again, back to that trust thing, which takes only 14 seconds. Here's someone who's done amazing work just with that.
I actually hired on trust and got it worked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of wrapping this up a little bit, we've gone into many different areas. I really appreciate having you on my podcast, Declares Light for Life. It's about life, and having you. You're great. You're a very kind person to do this for me, and I really appreciate it. I'll be sending you my the 3 virtual books that are out now, and the other one, when it's under construction, I'll send to you for nothing to your email inbox.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I usually give a coaching call, but I don't think you need coaching. So, it's a freebie. So I like to help people out get going themselves. I like to help people who need help on their journey. And people come first, money second.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you're of the same, we are definitely of the same cloth.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
We're definitely
take care of the people first. Yeah.
Yeah, same cloth. And I think that success will come when you do that.
Yes.
And I think this is just watching the eyeballs on different things. And this is something I've just watched, and I watch eyeballs after COVID. And this business was born during COVID. And so it's those who give good customer service, who make people feel like they're wanted and cared about, and love kindness and compassion, are going to be the successful business. And the hard-nosed businesses I'm watching are going to die off because people won't accept it anymore, because people are hungry. They're hungry for positivity. They're absolutely hungry. And a good example is, I find a lot of older people at my church, because I work at my church in greeting, they crave hugs. And I love giving hugs and seeing their eyes light up for the day.
Yeah, that's excellent.
I can see that you do the same thing.
Yes.
You like to light people's eyes up. But can I tell you something?
Sure.
I think for both me and you, that's our greatest pay.
Yes, it absolutely is.
Our greatest pay is what hits here in the heart.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can replace with that. Nothing you can replace.
Absolutely. Well, I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Can you give 3 takeaways?
Oh, sure.
Give
Yeah.
to the audience. That would be great.
Yeah. So the first takeaway is to go back to all the experiences you had, the good and the bad decisions that you would have. Let's start with the bad ones and think about um, what did it feel like in the moment, and that gives you your negative signals. The second thing is I do with the decisions that you made that were the right ones, and those are your positive signals. And once you have your negative and positive signals as inventories, the next thing is just to take action. You have the signals in front of you, take action, because those are the decisions that always lead to success.
Great. Thank you very much. I also want to let you know that we are on the platforms of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, and Pinterest. And I would gladly check you out and check these out, learn about what we're doing and great things that you can learn. And also check out our website, Declares Delight for Life. It's Declares Delight for Life, DECLUTTERS, Delight, DELIGHT, for FOLIFE.com. I know that was a little bit long to spell out, but what I would also love for you to check out and share this information with others and share them about the podcast, because it has great value, because you can learn about the experience and strength of others, and that experience and strength of others can go within you. And I would also love you to check out our books, Clutter to Declutter, 28 Days to Declutter Your Mind, Declutter Your Mind for Now. And if you think about it, in the next 2 months, we're going to have another book out, The Secrets to Overcoming Depression, Anxiety, and Stress. And I know for a lot of you out there, these are things that you can address. And we have these, and they were done from the heart, from me to you. And over the next couple months, you will see things out also in audio and video with these books. And check it out. I hope these would be of great value, because that's what we want to give you: great value and love, kindness, compassion, and hope and love and truth. Thank you. And I appreciate everything and who you are. And thank you. Thank you for coming to Claire's Delight for Life. It's about life. I hope you enjoyed our podcast as much as I did, and I hope you have a great day.